Jaxson Dart is going to play his game of the year against Oklahoma now.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, a former staff member at Ole Miss and a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports. Today on the show, we talk about how Billy Bowman from Oklahoma called out Jaxson Dart on social media and Dart clapped back. We have talked about Jaxson Dart's need for a mule game, and Bowman just kind of offered that up. So that got us thinking, who will be the rivals for the Sooners and the Longhorns in the SEC? This is the Locked On Ole Miss Podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the everydayers who make the show what it is. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Really interesting stuff. So Billy Bowman, a defensive back from the Oklahoma Sooners, decided to have a little bit of fun on social media. Basically, this all started because of this weird fixation that people have on social media about routes on air. I mean, whenever he just throws the ball long and it gets caught or something like that, that goes nuts. And you have players that make it into the top 5 of the NFL draft doing routes on air. I kid you not. But Jaxson Dart was doing that at the end of the Manning Passing Academy, just like Quinn Ewers, just like everyone else. And somebody made a comment about how he used his legs or something like that. And he ran out there. Like I said, this was all on air. So it was essentially meaningless. So it's kind of funny that they tried to take something out of it originally. And it's really funny the direction it went. So he threw it downfield. I think he missed the target or something like that. And Billy Bowman popped up and quote tweeted it and said, "Oh, that's a pick six." Okay, first off, Billy, let's talk for a second. You're not doing a pick six on a fade route 45 yards downfield at your own 5-yard line. Nobody's doing it. Ed Reed's not doing that. Deion Sanders is not doing that. So a pick, maybe. Pick six, no, not really. Well, Jaxson Dart saw him make that comment and said, "Okay, we'll see, buddy." And talking, clapping back and all that. Jaxson Dart is a guy that plays better with a chip on his shoulder, that plays better when he needs motivation. When he played against the number 1 defense in the whole country last year in the Peach Bowl, he absolutely shredded them. They didn't have a chance, but that was because he was completely up for it. This is a guy that has answered every single bell that he has been asked of the times he was in college. Like the one time that he didn't come through was on a really great fingertip play on a 2-point conversion against Mississippi State. That's kind of the one time that pops out to whenever you needed a play, you needed a drive. He didn't make it. Now, he has not beaten Alabama yet. He has not beaten Georgia yet. But he's beaten pretty much everybody else. And last year, he was good. He was legit good. He wasn't just better than 2022. He was legit good. And if he makes the jump that I expect him to make in year 3, he's going to be Heisman good. He's going to be Jaden Daniels good. We had Mike Detillier on the podcast a couple of months back, and he talked about he wanted Jaxson Dart to come back to school instead of going to the NFL draft because he thinks that Jaxson Dart has the chance to have a Jaden Daniels type jump into this year of football. So it'll be really interesting to see how this goes, okay? It'll be really interesting to see how he develops. Now, Billy Bowman, he stepped in it. He stepped in it. This game is going to be in Oxford. It's going to be early in the afternoon. Everything is going to be working against the Oklahoma Sooners in this game. And Jaxson Dart will come out against a really good defense. Now, remember, Oklahoma probably has talent-wise the second best defense that Ole Miss is going to face this year. So thinking about that, Jaxson Dart was already going to be locked in this game. The back 7 of Oklahoma's defense, pretty good. So Jaxson Dart's going to already be locked in. Now he's going to be really locked in. And whenever you look at the weapons that he has at his disposal, he has potentially the best wide receiver in college football. Oklahoma's going to have to double this guy because he is number one, according to PFF, whenever he's single covered. So you can't single cover this guy or he will eat you up. Ask Penn State about that. You want to play one-on-one against this guy, you are going to lose. And then you've got Juice Wells. Juice Wells is somebody that Jaxson Dart's eyes lit up this weekend at the Manning Passing Academy of what he can do. He is electric with the ball in his hands. He is a prototypical slot-type wide receiver, and he has a chance to really force Jordan Watkins into hey, do you play outside? Do you play inside? There's 4 receivers for 3 positions on Ole Miss's team. Trey Harris isn't going anywhere, so that leaves three players for 2 positions, and they will answer everything. Jordan Watkins had a pretty good year as well. He was Mr. Reliable. Anytime that Jaxson Dart needed a first down, he looked Jordan Watkins' way. And then there's the new guy coming in, Deion Smith. Shea Hodge loves him. He says that by the end of the year, he'll be the number 1 receiver on Ole Miss's team. I don't know about that, but Shea's the guy that works with him. Deion Smith is a freak athletically, and get the guy into school, get the guy to go as far as he can go. He's probably going to be one and done, and just try and make the best out of this year. And if you look at the inside receivers, Caden Prieskorn, he was the offensive MVP, I believe, in the Peach Bowl. 10 catches, 136 yards, 2 touchdowns, had a 2-point conversion as well. Also had that beautiful hide play against Mississippi State that I called during the course of the week. And then Daquan Wright is a guy that he's a tight end, but he's more of a receiver than Caden Prieskorn. Caden Prieskorn is more the total normal tight end package. Daquan Wright is a little bit skewing towards Evan Ingram a little bit. So that's what it's looking like at the wide receiver position. Then you have Rashad Amos. You have Henry Parrish Jr. You have Logan Diggs when he gets healthy. You've got Ulysses Bentley IV. You've got weapons at the skill position, and Ole Miss has built up the trenches to the point where this offense is going to be pretty good. I mean, it's going to take a lot for this offense not to be very good. If the offense is not very good, Charlie Weiss is going to have a rough year. Jaxson Dart is going to have a rough year. And that's what happened because the backup quarterbacks at Ole Miss, everybody knows about them and cares about them as well. But those pieces in place mean that talking noise and taking a shot at somebody you're playing, I don't know why you would do that. I mean, I guess you can come into the league with your guns a-blazing. I mean, maybe that's what Oklahoma's doing. They're going to try and come in and kick the door down. That's the game they're going to play. And that's fine. That's fine. But the reality of it is Oklahoma's going to come into Oxford an underdog. They were already an underdog. This isn't a situation to where Oklahoma's the superior program and the superior team playing against the Ole Miss Rebels. Ole Miss is going to come into that game a 7-point favorite, 7 to 10 points. So Oklahoma is the universe or the university that needs Ole Miss to kind of overlook what's going on, to be sleepy at 11 o'clock in the morning. And now you've just assumed that at least one player, and the most important player, is not going to be sleepy. And that right there interests the heck out of me. Thanks again for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day. Archie Manning had his mule game, and now Jaxson Dart has the chance to do the same. We'll tell you in just a second. Gametime is the place to get your MLB tickets with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and their lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. They have views from all the seats in the venue, the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation, all of that stuff, job loss protection, all the customer service bells and whistles that you're looking for, they probably have. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime, MLB tickets, NFL tickets, college football, all of those. So download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you each and every single day to bring you the biggest stories without all of that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. So, really interesting stuff. And I do mention that Archie Manning had the mule game against Tennessee in 1969. And that was kind of that and the primetime game against Alabama. That was his ascension into the forefront of college football and eventually on the draft boards in the NFL as well. But Jaxson Dart has been unable to have that moment. Now, he's had really good moments as a quarterback. I mean, against Penn State, completely taking apart the number one defense in the history, or number one defense in college football, or the LSU game where he led a comeback victory right at the end from the touchdown, the 99-yard drive that he led in the rain and wind against Mississippi State in 2022 is nothing to sneeze at as well. Against Tulane, he pulled it off. Against Arkansas, he pulled it off. He is quite simply potentially the most clutch quarterback that has ever played at Ole Miss. But he has not had the mule game. He has not had that moment to where he just completely stood up, to where everybody's attention was on him. The mule game, Archie Manning came into it, and Ole Miss came into it really fired up because Steve Kiner fired off his mouth and said, everybody says that Ole Miss has the horses. They look like a bunch of mules to me. I mean, it's kind of an innocuous statement, but Johnny Vaught made it into a thing, put a mule on the practice field, put a bumper sticker on it, the whole 9 yards. Johnny Vaught milked that. And Ole Miss took Tennessee apart, top 5 Tennessee apart that day in Jackson. I think it was 38-0. And it probably wasn't that close. Archie completely was throwing the ball all over the yard. They just took apart Tennessee from beginning to end, and Steve Kiner had nothing to say after that. This is the closest that Jaxson Dart is going to have to having a moment like that. This Oklahoma game, you've got a really good defense. You got a really good team. They're probably going to be somewhere between 15 and 25 when Ole Miss plays them, somewhere in that ballpark. And it's a chance for Ole Miss to come out ranked, 5th in the country? 4th, 3rd, somewhere in there against a number 15 Oklahoma and just completely take them apart. That is the opportunity that's in hand for Jaxson Dart. This is the game that would set up to make a Heisman moment in the Georgia game possible, if that makes sense. This is the game that Jaxson Dart goes out and performs in, and all of a sudden for the Georgia game, Heisman becomes a real story. It's November 9th. So we will see. This has a chance to be a massive, massive game for Ole Miss and Jaxson Dart, and specifically Jaxson Dart. Now, Ole Miss, they have dreams of national championship. They have dreams of SEC title. They have dreams of things that they have not had in decades, and they are real. This game is a must-get game for Ole Miss, and it's going to be a very tricky game because Oklahoma is a talented football team. Do not make any mistake. Oklahoma is a good team. Now, they have a first-year starting quarterback. They have different players that might be unknown, and they replaced all 5 of their offensive line. So there could be growing pains. But if you look at the blue chip ratio, and, that's something that Bud Elliott came up with before the transfer portal and all of that. But if you look at that, it's teams that can win the national title because of the talent that's supposedly on their roster. Oklahoma's blue chip ratio is up near 70%. So it's really good players playing for the Oklahoma Sooners. So they can get you. You have to be careful about this team. This is a tricky matchup especially at 11 o'clock in the morning in Oxford. So we'll see how it goes. I'm pretty fired up about this. I'm pretty fired up about what can happen. That game is a low-key game that I'm looking forward to. John Williams and guys at Locked On Sooners, I've already had them. We did a podcast with them when Ole Miss and Oklahoma was playing in the national championship baseball series. So we will see whenever that game happens. But Billy Bowman stepped in it whenever he decided to play on social media. Now, good for the confidence. I'm proud of the kid for being confident. But what he did was provided just a little bit more motivation for an Ole Miss team that needs some motivation at this point because they've been getting their backs patted for about 6 months. They need some negative reinforcement to come in that makes them a little bit angry whenever they feel like they're beaten down. It's like what Georgia went through 2 years ago when they beat TCU and they interviewed the player on the field and it was like, hey, you all said we'd go 7-5. That's what Lane has to do this year. He has to convince people that everybody is out to get them. And if he can do that, they're going to be pretty good. If they're not, they might struggle just a wee bit. Anyway, thanks again for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen. Who will the rivals be for Texas and OU in the SEC besides the usual suspects? All right, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available in the Amazon Fire TV channel app, in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available in the free Fire TV channels app. Be part of history. And there's still time to join the Grove Collective and help Ole Miss football be elite. You can go to thegrovecollective.com and join today. All right, really interesting stuff. This being Independence Day, I guess that has a special meaning to Oklahoma and Texas fans right now because they have declared their independence from the Big 12, and they are now in the Southeastern Conference. Now, there's some certain rivalries that are kind of baked in right now with both of these schools coming into the league. Not necessarily because of competitive, but more of familiarity than anything else. So I'm not saying that this is a rivalry. So whenever I compare Oklahoma and Missouri to Oklahoma and Texas, realize it's more like familiarity. There's some knowledge of each other, and you've made those trips and you've played a ton of games. So when you look at Oklahoma, we'll start with Oklahoma because this show is pretty much all about Oklahoma is the way it sits. They have Texas. Texas is one of the major rivalries and will be one of the biggest rivalries in the entire SEC. It was one of the biggest rivalries in the country a year ago. That's not going to change going into the conference. And you have Oklahoma and Missouri, and that's a Big 8 thing. They've played 100 times, something like that. They've played a good bit. Oklahoma usually wins. Oklahoma usually always won, but they played a lot. So there's a familiarity with the Oklahoma Sooners. Now, really interesting stuff. This is the game that I think that has a chance to be a sneaky rivalry moving forward, and that's Oklahoma and Arkansas. Do you believe that Oklahoma and Arkansas have played 0 times since 1919? To put that in perspective, my favorite current TV show is 1923. In 1923, Spencer Dutton could talk about the last time that that Oklahoma and Arkansas played a football game in the past tense. That happened before 1923. So I think that game has the chance to be an interesting rivalry moving forward. Should be fun. Now, if you go to the Texas side, Texas has Oklahoma, Texas has Texas A&M, and Texas is going to have Arkansas as well. That's an old Southwest Conference rivalry. They basically invented horns down. So Arkansas hates Texas with the fire of 1,000 suns. So it is not beyond the realm of possibility that those are kind of the 3 rivals that are situated. And Arkansas has Oklahoma, Texas, and Missouri coming in, which for a team that didn't have rivals, good for Arkansas having these teams come in. that you can have something that is meaningful. Good for Arkansas that this is happening. But I'm looking forward to see Texas and Texas A&M on the Saturday after Thanksgiving. That is must-see television. That is now bigger than anybody could possibly imagine, especially with the Jim Schlossnagle stuff. Really, really interesting stuff. Now, outside of those old Big 8 and Southwest Conference teams, who are the rivals? Who are going to stand out? This year, the biggest game on Texas' schedule is the Georgia Bulldogs. I mean, Oklahoma's good, Texas A&M's good, but the game that they think they're going to test themselves with will be the Georgia Bulldogs, but that's not going to be a rivalry. There's no proximity, and they're not going to play each other every year. So I'm thinking somebody like Mississippi State with Texas A&M, Ole Miss with Texas. I think Ole Miss has a chance to be a rival with Texas at least a little bit. I think the student body is similar. I think that they have a chance to be, I don't know, a little bit chirpy. And then you have the Kiffin and Sarkisian thing and all of that. It could make for some interesting theater. Oklahoma, I think Oklahoma and Alabama have a chance to be something. Or Oklahoma and LSU. I think that would be an interesting, I don't know, thing to look at currently. There's a lot of great games in the SEC right now. We are a long way from TBS broadcasting a 10-team SEC with the cartoon intro on there. And you're like, okay, so this is Vandy and Ole Miss and Mississippi State. And there's like literally one, maybe two teams that were legit over the course of the year. Now there's a lot of teams that are legit. I mean, you go down to what Missouri can do. Missouri is on the cusp of making the playoff. You've got Alabama, who has always playoff is the standard. You have Tennessee, who is very on the fringe of the playoff, depending on Nico Iamaleava. Georgia, obviously in. Texas in. See, this is what I'm talking about. Oklahoma is going to be going for the playoff. LSU is going to be going for the playoff. There's not a situation where there's a lot of Vanderbilts, Mississippi States, or like Kentucky's or South Carolina's or Florida's this year. It's like playoff and not playoff. There's haves and there's have-nots in the Southeastern Conference, and it'll be really interesting to see how it happens. Now, all the games this year will be on Disney channels, ABC, ESPN, ESPN2, all those, SEC Network. That is pretty cool. I think the SEC Media Days in 2025 is going to be in Orlando. That's cool. So the Disneyfication of the Southeastern Conference is going to be noticeable, I think, this year. So we'll see exactly how it goes. Anyway, I hope everybody has a good 4th of July. And thanks to everybody for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen. We have the most perspective surrounding Ole Miss sports. It's one of the many reasons why we're the number one Ole Miss podcast, and thank you for that. But for your second listen, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. And for those of you on YouTube, we will send you there right now. Happy 4th of July, everyone. Hotty toddy.